trust me, I get it. You're feeling the pressure to keep your faith separate from your work, worried that pursuing your God-given dreams might be seen as selfish or misguided. Here's what I've discovered. Our faith isn't a liability in our leadership. As a matter of fact, it's the source of our strength and wisdom. The real challenge is navigating how to boldly pursue our purpose while staying anchored in our faith. And that's exactly what the Beacon Show is all about. Each week, we bring you biblical wisdom and practical strategies from true beacons, Christian leaders who are illuminating the world. And it's also that you can let your light shine brighter and brighter. I'm Tamara Jackson, and this is The Beacon Show.
In the heart of Huntsville, Alabama, there is a place where second chances are born and lives are rebuilt from the ground up. At the helm of this beacon of hope stands Keith Overholt, a man whose journey from Buffalo Bills fan to CEO of the Downtown Rescue Mission is as unexpected as it is inspiring. Keith's story isn't just about following in his father's footsteps. It's a tale of pushing boundaries and reimagining what it means to serve the most vulnerable in our society. Under his leadership, the Downtown Rescue Mission has evolved from a single shelter to a multifaceted operation that touches lives in ways both big and small. But who is the man behind the mission? What drives someone to dedicate their life to some that society overlooks? And how does faith intersect with the harsh realities of homelessness, addiction, and poverty? Well, today we pull back the curtain on the Downtown Rescue Mission and the man who leads it. From thrift store strategies to capital campaigns, from daily challenges to big, hairy, audacious dreams, Keith offers a glimpse into a world where compassion meets action and where every face has a story waiting to be heard. Get ready for a conversation that will challenge your perceptions, ignite your passion, and perhaps even redefine your understanding of what it means to truly serve. This is my friend Keith Overholt's story, a testament to the power of faith, vision, and the unwavering belief that every life is worth saving. Enjoy. All right, Keith. Welcome to the Beacon Show, where wisdom meets faith and success finds its voice. Appreciate your patience with me today. I was running a little behind, and just the time that we've had to catch up and to share. I just believe that this time will be a blessing to our audience. And so thank you for making space in your schedule to be here with us today.
Sure. Appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's easy to do, Keith, when I look at the work that you and your team are doing and the impact that you're having in the community. I'm honored to have this conversation and be able to learn from your wisdom personally and to share it with the audience. But I always like to start at the beginning for each of our guests that join us on the show. So I'd love for you to start by telling us a little bit about your childhood. What was little Keith like?
Yeah.
What was he into?
I grew up in the suburbs of Buffalo, New York, and had a great childhood. My dad was and he's still alive, but a Baptist minister. And that's different up north. Baptist minister in the South, where I am now, everybody understands that. And but being up north, I went to public school, and we had about 500 kids in my graduating class, and my dad was asked to do the prayer. And so the kids were like, "Oh, your dad's a priest." And I was like, "No, he's a Baptist minister." And they said, "Well, how are you here?" And I said, "Well, he's a Baptist minister. He can have a wife and kids, And so, but I grew up in that kind of area. I grew up in a really good Christian home, where my dad was the pastor and my mom was the faithful Christian, right? My dad is a good Christian man, but she was just, almost the kind of lady that you look at and say, man, what a testimony. And she was sick through the years. My mom had cancer when I was real young, and we weren't sure that she was going to live beyond me being about 5 years old. And because of that, I have adopted siblings. So I have a sister that's from Korea, and I have a brother that's from Nicaragua, and I have a another sister that is from the United States. And so I grew up in a United Nations kind of home,
That's cool.
yeah. And they are my brothers and sisters, just like if they were my mom had them naturally. And but yeah, it was interesting growing up that way. My mom ended up having cancer two more times and did pass away at a young age of 54, but really a great Christian testimony, a great lady to, even through her struggles, you could see just Christ shining through. And I love that because it really resembled that for me to say, hey, listen, there's somebody I can depend on besides, myself or the environment that's around me. I can depend on the Lord.
Hmm. I'm curious, having to watch your mom go through everything and ultimately seeing her transition. How did that shape you as a person, just growing up? How did that shape your outlook on the world?
Yeah, I think when you see somebody going through something, struggling that hard, she actually, when I got a little bit older, she passed when I was about 30 years old, and she said, you know, Keith, I've been pricked and prodded, and she's a very private person. And she's like, I've had about every needle stuck in me, and I've taken medicine to try to get through these things, and I've had surgeries, and you could just see, she's like, man, I'm gonna get to heaven one day, and I'm gonna go, why did I fight so hard? And that's what stuck with me because it was like, man, we're doing this, but we're only here part time. Our
Hmm.
eternity is somewhere else. And that's what's going to be amazing for us someday because we're all going to be in glory together and be able to say, hey, listen, it was worth the struggles, right? So
Hmm.
that's my outlook on life that, really, boy, there's nothing harder that I could go through that my mom didn't go through. So it's not that bad.
Hmm. That's good perspective. How did that shape you as a teenager when you're starting to make decisions about what to do with your life, what you were going to be when you grew up? Now, let's start with this, though. I'm always curious about this. What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
You know what? I always told people that I wasn't not going to be a pastor. For some
Hmm.
reason, I was like, "Hey, my dad's the pastor,"
Yeah.
and I'm kind of over in ministry where I am the head pastor, even though I'm not ordained. Right? I
Yeah,
mean, this is a ministry. So,
that's right.
my dad used to say he had a church that was in the country for a while, and he would tell people, "I'll never be a pastor in the city." And then the next place he was is downtown Buffalo, two blocks from City Hall. And I feel the same way. You don't ever tell God,
What you're
you
not
know,
going to do.
hey, I'm not going to do that, and then God's going to put you there the next thing. You know, what I
He
mean,
absolutely is.
yeah. So that's kind of how it shaped me. What did I want to be? There was things like when I was real young, I wanted to be like a marine biologist or something like that. But really, I always had a bent towards wanting to help people.
Hmm.
And so even as I started my career young, I was helping with folks that were mentally handicapped and things like that. So, there was always something in my life that I wanted to help somebody else.
Hmm. Wow. So what was the first job that you took?
The
Do you
first
remember?
job I ever had, I was actually only 11 years old, and I worked at a inner city ministry that was called the Buffalo Christian Center in Buffalo,
Hmm.
and they had a roller skating rink and a swimming pool, and it was a place that churches could bring their youth to and have activities and stuff. And so I worked there for like $1 an hour. It really was just to have something to do.
Yeah.
And so a lot of fun that I had when I was there, but it was that would be the first job that I ever had.
Mm. And then from there, where did the journey take you before, of course, the audience will learn that you eventually took over the work from dad? Where did the journey lead you from there?
I worked some, during high school and college. I was at Wendy's for a while. I worked at a Christian radio station when I was in college, a big radio station called WDCX up in Buffalo. And then I worked at a Christian radio station. And then during that time, I transitioned over to actually work at the mission where my dad had taken over as the director up at the Buffalo City Mission up in
Hmm.
Buffalo.
Wow. So interesting though, when I listened to kind of the journey for you, it was a mix of different things, right? Before you got to this place, which I'll say maybe is your dream job.
Yeah.
So as you were kind of going through the journey, did you enjoy the different jobs? Did you ever experience moments of frustration, like this isn't what I thought I would be doing? Any of that?
It's interesting. As I look back to what I'm doing now, I'll be 55 years old this year. Each one of my jobs that I had, even as a kid,
Hmm.
really made me to do what I do today. From I worked at a place that was like a Home Depot for a while, and just the skills that you learn there to help out with make sure our maintenance is done here, and things that we did with the cooking the food at the even at Wendy's. I helped the guys down here in our kitchen and know, hey, when they're talking about preparing for a certain amount of people, I'm like, well, you need this much, right? And
Hmm.
so each one of my jobs, I really think it was a process that God took me through to get me to where He's like, hey, I'm preparing you for the job that I've got for you for the future.
Wow. That's actually a pretty consistent theme as I talk to different leaders on the show is many times as we're going through these different things, we might not understand how it fits together.
Yeah,
But then further along in the journey, it's like, oh, yeah, I kind of needed that because it actually prepared me for the work that I am doing now. And I hope that our viewing and listening audience takes that away. Don't be frustrated with where you are now. Believe that all things work together
yeah,
for the good of those that love the Lord. And so he's somehow going to take these experiences that you're going through and he's going to use them for good. And what's great is that it's not just good for you, it's going to be a blessing if you continue to surrender to him. It will be a
sure.
blessing to those that you ultimately serve.
Well, it's just like I worked in radio and TV, and boy, in the role I'm in, I'm on TV quite a bit here, for interviews about what we do, and I'm on radio, and boy, that helped me because when I went in, I'm not like, well, what is this new form that I've got to figure out? I already knew that because God had already taken me through that, which was a neat thing.
Hmm. That is neat, right? Because public speaking can be really challenging.
Oh
it's
yeah,
still one of those top fears that's on the list, but
yeah,
because you had gone through it before and developed the comfort level, you were really able to step into that and embrace that as an opportunity to share
yeah,
versus viewing it as an obstacle. So yeah, that is really cool. So talk to us a little bit about your organization. I was looking at the numbers before our conversation. I was really blown away with the impact that you're having. But I want our audience to get a sense of it as well. So tell us the mission of the Mission Center
yeah.
and the type of impact that you guys are able to create.
Yeah, it's Downtown Rescue Mission, and we're in North Alabama, right in Huntsville, Alabama, and we are a organization that was started in 1975. So next year we will have our 50th anniversary. The organization was really started by a gentleman that I actually knew. He just passed away a couple years ago. That his son had had an accident, was in the hospital, and somebody came and visited him and said, hey, listen, uh, there's homeless in the area, as they were talking. And he started talking about, there's different homeless people in the alleyways and things. And this guy's like, well, no, I've not seen that. And he said, well, come with me one day. So they were friends, and he went with them, and they started looking. And so from that, they started serving some sandwiches out of the back of a vehicle. And so they were like, hey, we're at least going to take care of these needs. From there, it went to, hey, we really need to find a place for these folks to stay. They can't just be on the street either when it's really hot or when it's really cold. So let's find them a place to stay. And then, that was the humble beginnings of how this started to the operation that we have now, with it's on about 18 acres. We've got about 130,000 square feet of facilities. We sleep about 300 to 350 men, women, and children a night. And we provide services for the community. Besides food and clothing, we also have counseling here. We have a 1 year program that really helps take people from the depths of either addiction or homelessness and takes them to another level to really appreciate what God's done for them and then find a new life in Him. And that's really what we do. The Downtown Rescue Mission, people think of a rescue mission a lot of times as soup, soap, and salvation, right? You give them soap, they can get cleaned up.
Yeah.
You give them something to eat, they're okay,
Yeah.
and maybe have a place for them to sleep, and you preach to them, right? It's much more than that. We really invest in the people in our community to say, hey, we're here to help whoever's in need. And sometimes those people in need are much more than the people that you might think of, that 60-year-old guy that's under the bridge with a bottle. It's much more than that.
I'm so glad you said that. And I really want to get into this because I was actually having a conversation with one of my friends that has a passion for homelessness in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live. And we were having a conversation because I was ignorant to it. I was like, well, tell me about, from your experience, how do people end up here?
Hmm.
And there were so many different answers that she had because, sometimes I think it can be easy to jump to the conclusion that the individual must have done something drastically wrong. They were on drugs, this and that. And sometimes that is the case, but
Sure.
that's not the totality of the situation. So, because of the work that you do, you have a lot of exposure. Help our audience understand what are some of the situations that drive people to homelessness.
Yeah. So there are some that are addicted. There we do deal with folks like that, but that is not the most. There's back in the 70s and 80s, there was a movement to really start shutting down some of the mental institutions. And so about 40% of our population that stay with us have some kind of mental illness. And a lot of that is because we don't have facilities like we used to that were government run, and they pretty much just shut them down, and those people just ended up on the streets. Well, we as missions kind of took over that portion. So about 40% of our population are have some type of mental illness, from anywhere from very severe to schizophrenia and those kind of things. Um, we also have about 40% of our population is women and women with children. So that was a thing that happened more in the 80s and 90s, where women started to become homeless. And back then I had started in rescue mission work, and people used to say, I don't see women on the streets, back then. I said, well, here's the thing that a woman's going to do. She is going to make sure that, especially if she has children, that they're going to be protected. So she may be in a bad relationship, or she may be in a place where, listen, I've just got a roof over my kid's head, whether I'm getting beaten or not, I'm going to make sure that they're going to be protected. And they're at least being fed, and they've got a place to stay. Well, when the mission started opening up facilities for women and children, the places started filling up quickly because these people had a place to go that was safe, that the mom didn't have to worry about herself anymore either. She was the one that was going through the issues with the relationship, and the kids were being taken care of, but man, now she had a place to go.
Hmm. I can totally believe that, right? Because you, just as you said, you're going to do whatever it takes to look out for your children. Wow. So the need is so great is also what I heard you say, right? You
Yeah.
guys can't even take in all of the people that really need your help. But talk us through, like, just so that people understand, what does it take? Like, if you're taking care of one person that comes through your doors, what type of financial commitment is that? Just to give us context on what it really takes to just do the bare minimum. It's not like they're living a life of luxury there, but
Sure.
just to do the bare minimum, what does it really take?
Well, if they're in our emergency shelter, which is, we really have two separate sections. Our emergency shelter is for anybody come off the street. And I don't care if you're drunk or on drugs, or I really don't care what your sexual background is. We're going to accept everybody in with God's love, because we want to make sure that you're taken care of. Um, so somebody that comes in there, we take care of the basic needs. You have a cool place during the summer to be, a warm place in the winter. You're going to get 3 meals a day. You're going to make sure you have a nice place to lay your head at night. And then we'll provide some case management for you. A person like that is probably around $30 to $40 a day. And we have probably, right now, we're averaging about 200 to 225 people in our emergency shelters. Then on the other side, we have a program, and that's for men and women, and then women with children, that they can go through this 1 year Bible-based program. And the cost is higher because we have more intensive training and teaching. And It's almost like going through a Bible school for a year when you go through our program. So that really is probably more like $70 per person per day. That's the cost of that. And we have around 100 to 120 people in our program at one time.
That's really exciting, though, that you're meeting the practical needs and then taking them deeper into their relationship with Christ. I would imagine that not everyone that comes to your doors has a relation that really knows Christ. So some are getting introduced for the first time, and
Sure.
others you're helping to disciple them. So I'm curious, what is in the year-long program?
So each one is like a semester, so it's quarterly, and you graduate that first, we call it the first step, second step, third step. And when you're going through those steps, it's called our life transformation program. Um, you actually get a certificate just even passing the first few months. Every 3 months you get a certificate. And a lot of these folks haven't even graduated high school or have never received a certificate. Just going through the first 3 months, people are like, oh my goodness, look what I've got.
Wow.
And what that means to get that certificate is that we do some job training that's part of that, but also they're in class. So they're learning things like experiencing God or freedom from addiction. They're courses that we take them through that are readily available at like a bookstore, but we have them that we formulated together that it builds them from being a new Christian all the way up to. And listen, there's some people that go through our program that never become a Christian, but they're going to learn what God has in store for them because really that's what we're here for. I love what we do at the mission. I love that we serve the meals, we provide clothing, we provide shelter. But I tell my board all the time, listen, if we didn't have to do that and still could share the gospel the way we do, that'd be okay. I love that we have these side benefits, but the reason we're here is
Yeah.
to share the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
the whole focus of the program is really each one of the sections, they take about 3 or 4 courses each section, and each one of those sections is to help them become closer to God.
Hmm. I was reading something. It reminds me of something I was reading in, I think it was the Enduring Word commentary yesterday, and it was talking specifically about giving people help, and it made a point. I won't get it exactly right, but it made a point, Keith. Hey, it's great to give people help, but ultimately, the best help that you can give people is the gospel,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what you're looking to do. Maybe the reason that they're attracted to the center is because of their practical needs. But now that you're here, I'm going to at least introduce you. Now, you may not decide to accept him at this point, but there's also power in planting seeds, right? Because you never know when they leave the center what God is going to continue to do. He's going to continue to nurture that seed, and they may eventually come to faith, but you guys are a part of getting them started on that journey. So this is critically important stuff. We've talked about the financial needs to make all of this happen and impact these individuals. Let's talk about staffing. How many people work at the center? And I'd be curious to how many are kind of frontline workers versus leaders, just to give a perspective on
Sure.
how the organization is set up.
So, just to preface it all by saying we also have thrift stores here. So we have 150 employees total. About 70 or 80 of those are at our thrift stores, and so we have the rest of them, 70 or so, that are at our campus. Of those, we probably have about 30 that work directly with the folks in the program or in the emergency shelters. Um, and so the 80 that work at our thrift stores, and I love telling this, our thrift stores really help support us. And it's another way that the community can give to us because it's through their donations and they come shopping with us. But all those proceeds come back to run the mission. And that also helps with the donation side. We have people that write us a check and say, hey, I want to give you $10 to help you out this month, or $50 want to help you out this month. But that altogether helps us be able to provide the services that we do. And about 30 of those folks are the ones that work directly with our program guests that are with us.
So a lot of folks are needed to make the impact that you are making. How do you keep everyone on the same page?
Oh, everybody on the same page. Well, really, for me, I go to the Lord first. I pray a lot about the mission. I pray. One of the things it tells us in James is that we are supposed to pray for wisdom. and that he will grant it to us. So I pray for wisdom all the time. And I say, Lord, give me the wisdom of Solomon. I'm going to go all out, right? I'm going to try to get as much wisdom as I can. Solomon was one of the wisest men in the Bible. And so I pray, Lord, give me the wisdom of Solomon. And my prayer is, Lord, that it's not Keith that is shown through with the wisdom, but it's really that God is showing through with the wisdom, that the decisions that are being made, it's because it looks like it's coming from God and not from Keith. So that's my first thing is I go to prayer. The second thing is you got to build a really good team around you. If you don't have a team that's with you and you're on the same page and you have the same beliefs and you know what the goal is and that you're called to do what you do, if you don't have those things, it's going to be a rough road because the team is really the ones that help drive the day-to-day operations of what happens here at the mission. I manage the whole thing, but each one has a certain amount of people that they're managing. And if you didn't have that to help do that, boy, it'd be really tough not to have some good people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no way, right, that you could. And I think, in essence, what I heard you say is that you're leading the organization, but it really is not possible to do what you do without all of these talented individuals that come in every day, work at the thrift store and all of the other areas. I'm curious, are there also volunteers that just donate their time to support the
Yeah,
work
we
that
have around 6,000 volunteers throughout a year that come here. That means some come and serve one meal, or some are here every week. We'll have the one-timers, we call them. They'll come at Thanksgiving or Christmas, but then we have the other ones who are very faithful and they'll help us out with, helping out at a desk, or they'll help out serving meals, or they'll paint a room for us, or help us with we have 18 acres here, so they do some of the landscaping for us.
Mm.
And this community is very good about both giving and volunteering, and it's a big part of why our cost would be way higher if I had to hire everybody, because the volunteers really help us keep our costs down.
Yeah. So let's say someone is listening to us and wants to volunteer their time. What type of role could they expect? Sometimes, I've talked to a lot of people, and sometimes people are like, well, I don't know, because I'm not sure what I would be getting into, the type
Yeah,
of commitment that it would be. So
sure.
just give us a sense of what it typically looks like for a volunteer.
Yeah, for us, we do an online approach to it. So they come online and they fill out information things that they like to do. Then we have one of our coordinators call and say, "Hey, listen, we have these opportunities. We have a schedule." Some people, sign up to say, "Hey, I want to throw a birthday party for the kids," right? So we'll have 25, 30 kids here at a time, and we always have birthdays here. So they'll say, "Hey, I want to do one of those things," or it might be that they just want to serve a meal once in a while, or maybe it's that they want to help us, build a gazebo, or paint a hallway, or those things. When we have those items come up, we put those on the list on our online portal so that they can pick and choose from there. But what I always tell people is we've had people from 3 years old to 93 years old. I mean, it's safe environment. When you come here, people are usually very happy that you're serving them a meal or helping out. They know that they're in need, the folks that we take care of. So it's very safe. We have security and we have cameras and we have all the rest to get on our campus here. But, really it is uh, fulfilling to come here and to serve the Lord in a way of volunteering. Like I said, you could be 3 to 93 and have a really good time.
Hmm. As I heard you sharing that, I hear where you're going, right? It's a person who's thinking about volunteering might be concerned that because of the population that you serve, that they may not be safe.
Sure.
What are some of the other, just in your experience, maybe myths that people might have about those that experience homelessness that may prevent them from wanting to support, whether it be volunteering with their time or supporting financially, whether it's through your center or the person that's on the street that you pass by and they
Yeah.
have their cup and their sign out. What are some of the myths that maybe could stand in the way of support?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've had people call me and say, "Hey, I'm not going to support you because those people need to go out and get a job."
Hmm.
And I said, I try to tell the people on the phone. Most of the time when they call me like that, they've already made their decision, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to try to, enlighten them a little bit about, hey, most of the people that come here have had good jobs.
Mm.
I've had a medical doctor come here that ended up losing his license because his schedule of, getting up at a certain time and going to sleep, he started prescribing himself drugs, right? And so he lost his license, and after 15 years of working in the medical field, ended up at a rescue mission. Can you imagine all that schooling and everything else? So here's a guy that was a worker but lost his job, right? Because he had gotten messed up into the drug world himself. Um, you know, and I've even had people say things like this, and it's tough. I consider those people dogs, and I'm like, what are you dogs? These are people. These are brothers and sisters. These are neighbors. These are our friends. In fact, um, I'll go back to this. This is really why I got started in rescue work. My dad worked in it as well, but the reason it was calling on my life, when I was 16 years old, I went down and visited my dad at the rescue mission in Buffalo. And I just got my driver's license. I'm driving down there and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go down there and he's going to take me out for lunch, right? 16-year-old, you know it all in the world, and you think your dad's going to do something for you, right? And so I get down there and he's like, yeah, I'll take you to lunch. Let's go down to the cafeteria at the mission, right? So I'm thinking, here I'm going to go out to at least McDonald's or something, and he's going to take me down to we're going to get grub at the mission, right? So we go down there, and I have to say, the Lord made that day. That was a day that changed my life, because as I'm sitting there talking to my dad, and let me just say this: mission food, even Buffalo and here, it's good food. I mean, we serve really good meals, so it was not like it was a bad thing to go there. But as I was talking to my dad, I looked up in the line, and the guys from the emergency shelter started coming in to get their meals. And there was a curly-headed blonde guy standing in the line, and I go, I'm 16, by the way. And I said, Dad, I know that guy. My dad's like, you don't know that guy. I said, no, I know that guy that's up in the line there. And he said, how do you know him? He said, we live in the suburbs about 12, 13 miles away. And that's where my high school was. It's all, the things that I was doing. And I said, that's Joe. He's a couple years ahead of me in high school. And both of us played sports. He played on the soccer team and I played on the football team. But we knew each other. I knew who he was. And so my dad's like, well, go talk to him. So I sat down and talked to him for a few minutes. And Joe had started out at a young age, starting to party on weekends, drinking when he's 12, 13 years old. Then started smoking some marijuana on the weekends. And during his high school years, it got worse. Even though he was an athlete, on weekends, he started drinking and smoking a lot, and ended up getting into some harder core drugs. And he's about 18, 19 years old when I saw him in the line, and he said, yeah, Keith, I'm here. My parents kicked me out because I've stole from them so many times now. They don't want me back. And I don't think it was that his parents didn't want him back. They just couldn't take him anymore because he couldn't have that in their lives anymore. I don't know what happened to Joe because I never saw him at the mission after that day. But that day changed my life, because I was like, if Joe, who comes from the same neighborhood that I do, can end up at a mission downtown Buffalo, 13, 14 miles from where we lived, boy, but for the grace of God, I could be here too. And so my rest of my life, I was like, I've got to help guys like Joe. I tell my staff that all the time. Joe is still I still see Joe in the faces of the people that are here. And that's really the reason why I do it, is because I want to make sure that guys like Joe can hear there's a way that you can change your life. And again, that's through Jesus Christ.
Wow. All those years ago.
All those years ago. Yeah.
Still on your mind every day. And
Oh,
you're
yeah.
transferring that message to your staff. What I hear as an author and as a storyteller, right, is stories really help too, right? Because it's easy to just be like, oh, well, it's, they did this, that, and the other, and that's why they're there and they deserve what they get. And
Sure.
I can't even repeat that thought process that the person shared with you. Like, I just don't even know how you could think of people in that way. But when you hear the stories, it's like,
yeah,
like, that could be me.
I could be one paycheck, not getting one paycheck, or one client for those of us that are business owners from
Yeah.
being in that position, and your life could drastically change. And I love how you keep bringing this back to the gospel, right? Because Jesus did that. He was in places and talking to people that other people wrote off and said, didn't have value, and wanted to condemn, but he showed love and compassion to them. And it's what it sounds like you're trying to do is, yeah, I know that people have fallen on hard times, and sometimes, yeah, maybe they did make a bad choice or something that got them here, but that doesn't mean that they are exempt from our care and concern. It doesn't mean that God doesn't love them and doesn't care about them.
Yeah.
He loves them just as much as he loves us, right? And it's the human side of us that gets caught up in these things and elevates ourselves above others and things like that. But
Well,
you're
just take a look at what the Bible, I mean, he gives us the example. If we go through the history of what happened in the Bible, there's not very many good people that he had there. I mean, all the way from Abraham, he was an okay guy, but not really. But there was a lot of things he didn't
yeah,
do good,
you're right.
right? And so, I mean, we even look at like Paul, who wrote half of the New Testament. He was killing Christians, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, God transformed lives, and that's the business that we're in, right? And like I'll go back to, I can't, almost makes me throw up in my mouth when I hear people talk as bad as they do about people that are homeless or that are in addiction or that are mentally ill. Because here's the thing, that could be your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. I know that's cliche, but those are moms and dads and brothers and sisters that we help. They're our neighbors. They're people that, you know, they want the best for their lives too, and they've ended up on a bad track.
Yeah.
And that's what we're able to do. And that's what the Bible tells us that happened to how many lives through that are testimony after testimony. Even Jonah, he got on the wrong boat going the wrong way, right? And God course corrected that. So if he can do that with him, he can do that with all the rest of the folks that are going through the issues that we deal with.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then what I was thinking as you were sharing that, Keith, is we are a part of that process, because the message is for us to go
Yeah.
and to make disciples. And that's not just the people that we like and we think are doing a good job. It's everybody,
Yeah.
even people that have fallen on hard times. So this is such a valuable conversation. I'm also hearing a lot about your personal. I mean, I know that this is the work that you do, but you're very personally connected to this topic. Talk to us about how you keep yourself grounded, your personal routines as a leader. What does that look like for you outside of course, leading this great organization?
Sure. I think when you're in positions where there's a lot of pressure and especially leadership roles, I used to be a part of a Christian group specifically because when you're in this role, it's a lonely role sometimes. Because when you're the top dog in an organization, everybody looks to you for all the answers and for the board members and staff members and volunteers and your donors. They're looking to you to say, hey, he's got the answer. We're not perfect, right? I am not Jesus, right? So there are times that I'm going to make mistakes. And so I try to surround myself with people that are other business owners or pastors of big churches or whatever. Say, hey, listen, can we have a conversation? Because I know you're going through some of the same things I am, where there are these stresses that we're making big decisions that are sometimes multi-million-dollar decisions or life-changing decisions. Boy, that's an impact on my life because I'm thinking, boy, if I mess that up, and that's messing that person's life up. And so, along with that, along with surrounding myself with some really good friends that really try to feed into me and I feed into them, I think it has to go both ways. It can't just be them feeding into me. I have to do it too. But the other things that I do are I'm a fisherman. I'm an avid fisherman. I love sports. I try to get involved in some of that. I have two teenage daughters, so I spend a lot of time. I've got a real tall daughter. She's 6'3", so I'm in basketball games all the
Whoa.
time, and doing it. So I try to get some of my stress relief out there. I feel bad for the refs sometimes because I do yell at the ref once in a while. But yeah, I think those things are important. I think that you also have to be grounded in a good church, and those are the things for me. I've got to have my family life's got to be good. I've got to be in a good church, and then I surround myself with other Christians that can feed into me.
Yeah, great advice. I'm curious, are you able to just go into work and work a typical day and come on out? Or do you find yourself working late here and there, getting there early? And like, how does balance, in my opinion, is kind of a myth, but what does balance look like for you in terms of juggling all the different roles that you have?
Yeah, interesting because I've been in this rescue mission type of work with three missions total in my career. So, I'm asked to do a lot with that. Like I serve on a board that's with the National Association that we're part of. I serve on some local things here. I'm asked to teach at conferences and things like that. So there's a lot of going, right? And
Yeah.
so, I've got to keep myself grounded with that because sometimes I got to say no, because otherwise you'll be going nonstop. And there's one thing that I think that the Lord asks us to do. We're supposed to put Him first.
Mhm.
And I think that we're supposed to put our family second. Work comes third. And so this is a ministry and this is God's ministry, but it's got to be third in my life because those other two got to come first. Now, this is a huge priority. And you mentioned there's times that I'm working till 10 o'clock at night. There's times that I'm traveling across the country to teach at a seminar or I'm at a board meeting or things like that. But, and I'll just say this, if you're a CEO of a ministry, I think if you have a cell phone, you're on call all the time, right? So you're always going, right?
Yep.
But there are times when I tell my staff, "Hey, listen, I've got to take a couple of days, and you got to let me just go, unless there's a fire at one of our stores or something's majorly happening. Just give me a couple of days." And there's sometimes you have to detach like that. I've heard of other ministries where I've not done this myself yet, but they take sabbaticals once in a while. I think that's important. You got to take that time away to refresh and get yourself back in spirit that you can come back and say, man, I'm ready to go for the next 5, 10 years, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I love that. I have known some leaders to take sabbaticals and they come back refreshed and recharged. But even to your point, if maybe that's not the path that you take, just learning, I heard you say to say no.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us that really are driven by making an impact on the world, sometimes it's hard. And as I'm sure it is for you, it's like, well, this sounds like a good opportunity. I
Yeah.
might even see how God is at work in this, but there might be times where there is tension between should I do this or shouldn't I? So, do you have a process by which you kind of come to a decision on these things? And if so, what does that look like for you?
Well, you put me a lot smarter than I am because
I have confidence in
really,
you, Keith.
so really what I do is I put it to prayer and I
Mm,
discuss it with my wife. And if those two things match up, and my thought process is I've been through my prayer about it, and then if she reconfirms it for me, yes, I'll go ahead and do it, or that may be an answer for me to say no. But
mm,
that's my process. I don't have a list. I go to prayer, I consult my wife, and because there was a time where from church I was the head deacon, I was over the school board. I mean, it got to be a lot of things, and there was nights I wasn't home not because of work, but because of everything else, not till 9, 10 o'clock at night.
good.
And my wife pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I love that you're doing all this stuff, but we may
Mm,
need to cut this back at some point." So I think
wow.
there's two things. We got to listen to God's calling, and then we also have to listen to our family and say, "Hey, listen, that might be too much right now."
Mm. I love two things about that story. I love that she felt comfortable to tell you,
Oh
um,
yeah, she
and
feels real
give you that.
comfortable.
That's not her problem, huh?
Yeah,
So she tells you, but then also that you were open, that you were receptive to hearing that, because again, these are all I heard you going through the list. things that are good, and it's an opportunity for you to make an impact. So you could have been like, no, this is more important. Not more important, but this is important stuff. I need to do it, and I need you to understand.
Yeah.
But I guess it goes back to your priority list, right? Is God is first, family is second. So I have to stop and check in
Yeah.
and see how this is impacting my family before I commit.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, listen, if you don't have those, the first grounding is your relationship with the Lord, and then you don't have the second grounding of your relationship with your family. Listen, I'm a PK, a pastor's kid. I grew up seeing the turmoils and the things that happen in ministry firsthand. I was in the car when my mom and dad were discussing, man, this is something's going on here. You know, there's this issue here, or, well, praise the Lord, something happened over here, right?
Yeah.
That I knew that when I went into ministry myself, that I had to stay grounded to make sure that I had those two firm foundations for me. Because if your family's messed up, I don't care what kind of national preacher you are or national minister you are. Boy, if your family's not doing well, you're not going to be very effective in your role. But if I have a firm foundation that my family's supportive and they're doing well themselves, boy, that makes it a lot easier to be able to do things I do at work, and especially when I'm going to the Lord in prayer about it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. So I wonder, I just had a thought pop into my head, and I was listening to you share, and I was thinking, well, how does, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but how does that impact you personally in terms of the goals that you set for yourself as a leader and for your organization? Because you're not just saying, hey, here's what I want us to do in the impact. You've got this built-in check and balance of the family.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
do you discuss that with your family before you set goals, or how does that typically work?
When it comes to the work things, I bounce some of the things, you know, that are more grand scheme that is going to take my time.
Mm,
Day-to-day operational things, not as much, because listen, no, that's already something that we've got, you know, a proven track record on, right?
yeah.
It's, for instance, just 6, 8 months ago, my board approved for us to do a $10 million capital campaign. Well,
Mm,
that's going to take some more of my time. And so I
yeah.
said to my wife, I said, listen, this is the path we're going down. And I didn't get much pushback. She's like, yeah, I know the ministry needs it. And you're going to have to start going that direction. If we don't do that, there's going to be some people that aren't going to get helped, right? And so, and here's the process that I have at work for that too: is the leaders, the senior team that I have around me. I pull them in and say, hey, here's the direction I'm seeing, feeling like God's leading us, and I get a lot of their feedback before I come to that. And then when I bring it to them, and they, you know, my senior team, we're all 50s and older. And I said, hey, we could rest on our laurels. We have a wonderful ministry here. We could take the next 10, 15 years and just go into retirement. Or we could say, there's this capital need that we need to do. That's another big project. It's going to take us time and effort. And I told the whole group, I said, each one of us is going to take more of our time. We all agreed at the time, this was back in January, we said, yes, we need to push forward with this. This ministry is in need of this. So it wasn't just my family on that. I also go to my senior team and like, hey, listen, there's some big project. And again, like I said, we could have just said, hey, we've got 350 people we're helping here a day. We're
Mm,
doing a great job. Let's just pat ourselves on the back. No, first off, we're not going to do that. You know, it's not about patting ourselves on the back. Second is, what is God really calling us to do? Are we supposed to continue just sit here and rest in our laurels, or are we supposed to continue to expand to meet the need? Well, at this time, it's to expand and meet the need.
mm. I love that. It's a pattern though I'm hearing for you, Keith, and how you lead is that you're not making decisions in a silo.
Hmm.
You're, whether it's your wife or the team or the board, you're constantly checking in with folks before we get to the final decision to get their input. I even heard you say before you start bringing everybody together, it sounds like you're also having one-off conversations and picking brains here and there
Exactly.
before you come to a conclusion. Have you always done that, or is that something you learned the hard way?
Mhm. You know, I think that through the years I've learned some more of that, but I've always liked getting a coalition. together. And if you get that group together and there's a common theme and a common cause, it's easier to prove that. Like I've got to go and prove this stuff to my board. I've got a 20-member board that they're sitting there going, well, yeah, you've got a 10 to $12 million operation that you're running yearly. Oh, you want to add $10 million more capital campaign? Yeah, I've got to go and say, hey, this is the reason we got to do that. But if I've got my team that's on board with me, boy, it makes it a lot easier for me when we come back and say, hey, we're going to do it because they're already on board. But also, it makes it easier for me to go present that to the board and say, hey, listen, this is the direction we need to go. Hey, you know, I say to my senior team, do you agree? And yes, they say, hey, we're in agreement with this. And boy, that's an impression to the board to say, listen, that's the way to go forward. That's just something I always felt like, listen, if I can come in and voice it myself and try to, hey, persuade the board to go do something. But if I don't already have the backing of my team, boy, that's going to be a tough ride.
Great point. Now, practically speaking, this is gonna, like you said, require more time, effort, and energy of them. So give us a taste of how you cast vision so that people, I envision, hey, I'm having to weigh in my mind as I'm listening to Keith. Yes, this is good stuff, and it's gonna cause me to have to sacrifice. How do you cast vision in such a way that people are able to listen to you and come to the conclusion that even with all the sacrifices that I'm going to have to make, this is a good thing and I want to be a part of it?
That's good. I think that the thing that I try to have the realization for them is I take it from the grand picture down to the individual stories again. And I'll say, hey, remember the Joe, or remember Susie that came in last week. I don't want to lose a Susie because we don't have room for her to stay. And that's how I try to get the encouragement from my staff to say, hey, listen, I want to help Susie too. I want to put in that extra effort to make sure that one more life is not pulled away from something that we can help with because, hey, we didn't have the facilities or we didn't have the amount of funding that we needed, or boy, that gets your team energized to say, hey, I want to be on that team because, like I said, I played sports. I want us all to be together. I want us to score the goal, right?
Yeah.
So the goal for us is to make sure that we're trying to do as much as we can to reach our community for the gospel with the gospel of Christ. That's really what our whole goal is. So that's the energy that I try to get. I go from the big picture down to the small stories to say, man, we're going to help Joe. We're going to help Susie. We're going to help, the mom and kids who are coming through our door. And we're going to be able to help more because of what we're doing with these projects.
I love that. That storytelling is so important. So give us a sense, Keith, you mentioned the $10 million capital campaign. It's a big undertaking. Where does it put the organization 5-10 years from now if you're able to get that support?
Yeah. So what we're currently doing with the capital campaign, it's going to almost double the amount of people that we can help. So we built a brand new women and children's facility just 6 years ago. And we built it twice the size of the current need that we had. And within 6 months, it filled.
What?
Yeah, 6 months it took to fill. And so once we went through the whole COVID thing, and there's been some more homelessness since then, we're actually at the point where we're having to sleep people on mats on the floor, and I don't like doing that. And so for me, there's a need. We already are at capacity or over capacity. In fact, one of our areas can house about 60 to 65 single women, and we have about 80 that we're averaging right now. So when we have things like that happen, it's not hard to come back to the staff and say, hey, we've got to really, get going. This caught us a little bit by surprise because 6 years ago when we built that facility, we thought we had enough time for 5 to 10 years before we'd have to make sure we built. Well, it's quicker than that. I mean, 10 years happened within about 2 or 3, within about 6 months, really, is what happened. So,
wow, that's crazy. It makes me think. I know $10 million is the goal, But if we could get 20 or 30, that would be amazing too, because it sounds like whenever you set a goal and you meet it, more opportunity presents itself, right?
Sure.
Kind of like what you were telling us earlier about, women looking out for their kids. So because there isn't a place for them to go, they suck it up and they power through. But once you created an opportunity for them, here they are, right? So if you had, I know this is a wild question, but if money was no
Bring it
object,
on.
you could do anything. Like what does it
Yeah.
look like? I'm curious. What does the future
Yeah.
look like?
Well, I'll tell you this. So I've been here 25 years this year, and my whole the way I manage is I think that we continue to grow. I don't think you ever stand still. You give your staff rest. Don't get me wrong. I make sure they individually get rest. But as an organization, you're always trying to figure out how can we do this better or how can we grow to meet the needs. And that's been my whole purpose that I've been here for 25 years. So we've always had something going on. So much to the point that I even had a board member one time pull me aside. In fact, it was the mentor who started the mission. He said, Keith, how big is too big? And I said, well, when God tells us to stop.
I love it.
And he got it. He was like, well, looks like we're going to continue to grow then, right? And so, if here's the thing for us, you said if we had any kind of amount of money that we needed, I would of course hire more staff than we have. You can always use more staff to do when you're working one-on-one with people. The more staff you have to be able to do that, the more one-on-one you get, right? And so I would hire more staff. And then the other thing is when I do my 3 and 5 year planning, we also do a 10-year planning. Part of that, we do a dreams list, the things that we say, hey, these are dreams that if the mission had as much money as we had, what would those things be? So it's things like we'd like to have satellite ministries across North Alabama and Southern Tennessee, where maybe we do this on smaller scales in some of the other communities that have maybe not as much homeless as we do, but that we can go and put a ministry there and say, hey, we can do the day service and the night service there. And then if they need the program, they can come back to the mission, right? We have ideas of doing elderly care because our population is getting older and older. And our homeless population is going to do the same at some point. So, we'd like to provide where maybe like a homeless nursing home facility in the future. If you've not had a job because you've been in prison or something, you don't even have a ability to get into a place that might be government
Wow.
run.
I never thought about
So,
that.
so we have some homeless that are here right now that are 75, 80 years old, that at some point they're probably going to be with us the rest of their lives. Well, I'd like to have a place just for them. We have other ideas of having coffee shops and having, meeting areas out in the community where we're really more community event oriented. I'd love to see some of those come as well. So we have ideas. So if you can send some money, we'll be more than welcome.
Well, we're going to make sure that our viewing and listening audience knows how to get on the website, support the work that you're doing. But one of the things that I have found, Keith, so that's why I wanted you to share that is sometimes people know exactly, where the organization is going and what the vision is. And like we were talking about earlier, God has, cattle on 1,000 hills. The money is there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need to paint a picture of what is possible when we have the support. So I'm praying with you that those that are viewing and listening will rally behind this, because those are some really impactful initiatives that you're working towards. And God can do it.
I'd say this though, listen, on all these things, God has always supplied. Right. When we built that women's facility, we had a group come in and they did analysis for us, and they said, oh, you'll be able to raise about $4 to $4.5 million. And when I went to the architects, they're like, well, for that much money, you're not going to be able to build much.
Wow.
And so our capital campaign ended up being about 7.5 million, and God supplied the whole amount. When this group came in and said we could only do about half of that, so it was amazing to see how God works. And all these ideas that we have and the things that we'd like to do for the future, if it's God's timing and his plan, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'll give a quick story just because it's a great testimony. About a year and a half ago, my fundraising fellow and I were out, and we, at Christmas time, give all of our regular donors a Christmas gift. We give them Christmas cookies, and we go shake their hand, just thank them very much for what they're doing. And we had a donor pull us in the house and said, listen, I've seen your dream list of things that you like to do, and I'd like to make a big donation towards that. And they wrote a couple $1 million check to us and said, we'd like to get that kicked off. Well, listen, I had that in about 3 to 5 year plan. God had it for a plan now.
Yes. Yes.
So isn't that amazing how God works?
It is amazing. And Keith, what I want to make sure that our viewing and listening audience gets is you were ready. Let me break this down. You had a dream list. If you didn't have a dream list, and if that individual didn't have visibility, if they didn't know what it was, that moment may not have happened, right? So there's also a partnership that we have with God in doing the work to cast the vision, to make it play for people so they can understand what it is that we want to do.
Awesome.
And when we do that, then the resources that we need are supplied because people get it. Like, that's what I heard you say, is that individual got it. They were like, man, I can do something about this. I can help take some of those things off of that dreams list. But if there was no list, would the same thing have happened?
Yeah.
So many lessons there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So please keep that list going. Put some more stuff on there. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, wow, it always goes so fast. So I want to there's so many things that we've talked about today, but Keith, I'd love if our viewing and listening audience could get just one more final nugget of wisdom from you. You talked about how long you've been doing this. You're an experienced leader. I hear it in the stories and the things that you've shared with us so far. If you were to give your younger self advice from a leadership standpoint, what would you say? And maybe that'll help our audience.
I would say this, that I would go back and say, challenge God to see how great things can happen. You know, like I said, my ministry has been a growing ministry through the years. We continue to try to meet more and more needs. And it's been that we go and say, God, can we do this? And he answers every time. So don't ever worry about challenging God. And I'm not meaning like, you know, saying, God, I don't believe you or anything. I'm saying like challenge him to say that I have enough faith that God is going to take care of this, and to put those big projects out there, because boy, we have just flourished because of those big projects that we had faith that God was going to supply the need, that we've said in the beginning, hey, God, we're trusting you. I'm challenging you that you're going to see this through for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have to work. That doesn't mean that we don't have to make sure those dream lists are out there. It doesn't mean that we don't, put the boots to the ground and make sure that we're getting shovel ready and all the rest that's going on, right? But we say to God, listen, we're trusting that you're going to see this through, because there's going to be bumps in the road. Listen, it all sounds shiny when you're talking in an hour podcast. But
Right.
listen, there's bumps in the road, right? But that's still the times that we say to God, and probably even more so, I'm trusting you even through these bumps, right? So I would say make sure you're always pushing out there to God and challenging him to see what great things he's going to do for that ministry, or even in your own personal life.
I love that. It reminds me of experiencing God, because you mentioned that
Yeah.
earlier. Like, what do you set the budget based on, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, are you going to set it based on what you think you can do or what you need God to do? Great.
Yeah. God-sized budgets are my budget, right?
Yeah.
God's is always up
absolutely.
here. Mine's down here.
Yeah. And the great thing is you are, and your organization is an example of what can happen when you are willing to step out on faith and set that God-sized budget and trust God, even though it doesn't make sense how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
That he can do it.
Yeah.
That he can do it.
That's for sure.
Key, let's talk finally about legacy.
Yeah.
I love that your wife plays such a critical role in your decision-making process, your team, your board. You take their opinions into consideration as you're making decisions. When you think about all the people that are in your life, personally and professionally, when all is said and done, what is it that you hope that people will remember about you?
That I was a man of faith, that I trusted not in Keith's abilities, but in God's abilities. that the lasting legacy is that Downtown Rescue Mission isn't Keith Overholt, but when I pass it on to somebody else, that it's going to thrive, that it's going to be the ministry that God wants it to be, not just because Keith was here, but that it's because God is the center point. I've seen other ministries go through changes where it's not been good changes. And, you know, when when I hand this off and go on to retirement or even pass away or whatever it might be, I go to glory. You want to see this isn't going to be run the same when I'm gone. I want somebody else to come and be the leader that they are.
Yeah.
But the basics of what we do have to stay the same. There's a book out there called Mission Drift, and it's about where ministries and even some colleges and stuff, you know, have moved away from what they were originally founded on. And boy, I don't want that to happen here. I don't want this to become a social service organization. I want this to be that we're serving Christ, that at the end of the day, all the great things that we do is really just because we're pointing people to Jesus.
Amen. Well, I know it's only been an hour interview, but I've already got a chance to have a little glimpse of your heart and the way that you lead, the way that you love your family, and even those that come through the doors that many other people would write off. So I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today, with me, as well as the viewing and the listening audience. And we'll be praying for you and the team and looking forward to all that God is going to do through you. Thanks again.